Okay, we can't be doing this. Oh wait, yeah. Full screen. More. Live on Facebook. And of course my dog wants me.
No, she's my dog. Oh, don't show attention to her. You're so funny. Guys! Guys. Sorry, do not show any attention to her. So she'll come to me. Hi, baby, come here. Come here, baby. Dang it. Mom, don't show any attention to her. I can't. No, I want her to come to me. Yeah, she's her trophy this morning. So it's not a good idea to show her. She's my baby, so I can. She's my baby. She's mine. I picked the name. No, you know I did. No. Yeah, no. Guess what? Then Martin, I chose me. Stopper, my cat. Remember Stopper? My cat. Stopper.
The outdoor only cat?
The one my cat did that? Right.
Bandit?
No.
Pascal?
Yeah. I named them, right? Right, Mom?
Yeah.
I must have said Stalker. But I remember I can never say Stalker. Or is it Pascal? What did he die of?
He was born not healthy.
He had an infection? How old was he when he died? You only had him for like a month, right?
Yeah. I'm not sure that this is something I want to talk about on Facebook Live. Yes. Awesome. I got it working. I don't know how, but I did it.
It worked.
Facebook Live. Only been talking about it all morning. All right, let me see if I can share this. Good morning, everybody.
Oh, you started it? Start.
Okay, so let's get started here. And I'm gonna try maybe doing a split screen so that I can keep an eye on
Mom, how do I look?
comments and stuff. You know what? I'll just probably go back to the
Mom,
comments.
look at me. Mom.
I see you. Okay, so let's remember that we're all at home, and so I have 3 kids here, and we're normally doing school right now, and so I'm making sure. Okay, I can hear myself talking. Sorry. Um, so of course they're gonna be interrupting me, and I apologize for. I don't. I can't control them. They're just fun, but it's part of what I love about being at home. So I'm not complaining.
We're both crazy for you.
We're not going crazy yet. Okay,
Yes.
so welcome. I'm gonna just go ahead and go through my presentation, and then feel free to type in any questions and leave them in the comments. And at the end, I will make sure to address the questions. Also, if you have a topic that I haven't covered here, or that I've covered here, but because of keeping it simple, I'm not going in real detail, I'm open to doing more of these videos. So, and this is Alex. By the way, I'm Jessica, and I really miss my clients. Like, it's the hardest part about having to stay at home.
Why are you growling?
And my dog's gonna Thank you.
This is your fat chihuahua.
All right, so
Look at this.
yeah, no, we're getting to business here. All right, so first things first. Most of us, I'm assuming, because I titled the event, let's not get the dog growling. I titled the event "Taking Better Pictures with Your Cell Phone."
Why are you?
My dog's like a chihuahua. So I wanted to go over real quick the most important way of getting pictures on your phone. So make sure you're holding your phone right. And what I mean by that is it doesn't matter if you have it vertical or portrait or horizontal or landscape. It doesn't matter which way you're holding it. Try to hold it level and get your horizon, or like if you have a wall or something, make sure it's straight. That's going to be the first thing to make sure that to help you get better pictures. Also, you're going to want to be holding it with 2 hands and putting your arms against you, just like I do with my big professional camera. I hold it as tight as I can against me to kind of use my body to stabilize myself and to stabilize the camera, because that's the most common reason for your photos to turn out blurry. And then I think most people know this, but you might not. If you are trying to take a picture and you want to focus on something, you just click on whatever you're trying to focus on. And I switched it around, but so like if I wanted to take a picture of myself doing this, I would definitely, my phone has a sensor that senses my face, but whatever you want to focus on, that's what you click, you know, touch it with your finger. And so that's another way to make sure that what you want in focus is actually in focus. And then if you have a setting in your phone where you can take a picture with your volume buttons or any of your buttons here, or if you have that button that is down in the middle here, just make sure that you don't take your hand off to take that picture And then when you take the picture, wait until your camera fully takes the picture before you let go. So, say you have a button here that you can take the picture with. So instead of going like that, ease into it, don't move, keep everything still. It's just like shooting a gun. You want to like just barely click it, and I clicked it. So I just took a selfie of my mouth. But so that's like the basic how to make sure that you have the best focus, and just being as still as you can and as gentle as you can when you're actually triggering the picture. Okay, so I'm gonna check and see if we've had any questions or comments or anything, which we have not. Okay, not that I can see anyway. Make sure when you stop in that you're saying hi. And then I have a presentation that I'm going to do. Oh yeah, I remember how to do this. Okay. All right. So first, let me introduce myself. I'm Jessica, and I am the owner of one of the owners of Ivory Anchor Studio. And I've been doing photography for, I mean, I've always loved taking pictures, but like I got my first, what I would consider a professional camera, um, almost 7 years ago. It'll be 7 years in January. My dog is being weird. And so I lost train of thought. Anyway, yeah, been taking pictures for 7 years. I started Ivory Anchor Studio about 3 years ago. This is my third year. It'll be 3 years in October. And one of the things that I've always loved doing from the start is sharing all the information that I have found. Just because sometimes for me it was hard to find, and I'm not really that great at asking people for the information. And so I did a lot of studying, a lot of paid classes, and I did not go to college for it, but fun fact, in high school, I failed photography class. It's the only class that I ever failed because I, quote, didn't need this class. But that's another story for another day. And I tell everybody. Okay, so me phone over here. Okay, so let's do the first slide here. All right, so I'm gonna try to keep this as short as possible. And remember, we will have a question and answers at the end. And make sure that you comment when you're here and that you comment any questions that you have or suggestions for future, I guess, webinars is what this would be. In those future classes or webinars or whatever you want to call this, we can always go more in depth. So I'm going to keep this information pretty basic. But at least it gives you a starting point and a little bit of an understanding of basic photography. Even if you're just using your phone, I think it's kind of important to know these things. So yeah, feel free to let us know anything that you'd be interested in learning in the future. So the basics that we're going to go over are composition, exposure, rule of thirds, and cropping. Composition. What is composition? Composition is the placement or arrangement of visual elements or ingredients in a work of art as distinct from the subject of a work. So composition is overall what is in the photo, and kind of how you use what is in the photo to bring attention to your subject. So for example, if you're taking a picture of your dog, you want it to pay attention more than what is the subject, which is the dog, and the composition, how you place the dog in relation to yourself and the surrounding, what's around the dog. So parts of composition. 5 elements of composition are pattern, symmetry, texture, depth of field, and lines. And you don't have to use all of these all at once, or even use them at all if you don't feel like it. The great thing about photography is it's very subjective, and all that really matters is that you like it. But these things do help keep it interesting and keep it more than just oh, that mom just took that photo. It makes it more like a wow, you're really good at this kind of thing. So when you're intentionally using these things, that's what makes for a better picture. And I use better as a very subjective thing. So don't ever feel like, oh, this is wrong. Because I would never ever say, like, you did that wrong. But I might say, oh, that's interesting you made that choice. I would do it this way. Okay, so the first element is pattern. So let's say you, and I think this would be a fun challenge. We already have a contest going on the other page, but it would be fun to see if you guys could find patterns all around you. So like, for example, with me, I can see there's patterns in my window blinds. My shades have patterns, and my hardwood floor has patterns in them that are interesting. My ceiling has patterns. Even the fabric on my sofa has patterns. They're just everywhere. I have a pattern that I like in my heating vent, but I mean, they're everywhere. So when you're taking pictures, just take note of what's around that could make that photo more interesting and see if you can capture the patterns. Now, what I was talking about with the challenge is it would be kind of cool if you could find patterns in your house and post a picture comment showing the patterns that you found. I think that'd be fun. And I just made that up, so you don't have to do it, but I would love to see it. Okay, and also another pattern that I've noted in my notes is even in my fireplace, there's vents and there's patterns in there. It's a little dusty right now, but still pretty cool. All right. Oh, and another thing that patterns used a lot is like at Bridge Park, there is a lot of patterns in the bridges built in. So they add symmetry. So a symmetrical shot with a strong composition and a good point of interest can lead to a striking image. But without the strong point of interest, it can be a little predictable. So let's say, and sometimes I break this rule on purpose, but remember that symmetry doesn't have to be like, if you have a tree on this side, you have a tree on this side too, and they have to be the perfect pair and exactly the same, and your subject's in the middle. That's not exactly what I mean here with symmetry. Although sometimes it is. It's the confusing rule because if you have a really strong subject, let's say you have, well, most likely you'll have a child and you have the most beautiful light coming into their eyes and you really want to capture that. You could place them in the middle and then anything in the background, let's say you have something on this side and there's nothing over here, it would feel a little off balance. So if you have it more symmetric and you have something else that's equal in size, it might help bring a little bit of balance to the picture. Now, if you have something that is where you really want to bring attention to a really fascinating subject, then placing it in the middle and having everything be exactly the same. It's kind of cool because, like, let's say you're walking down a path and there's two trees that are identical. I mean, that would be kind of an interesting picture. But if you don't have a really strong subject or a really clear point of interest, then it kind of just gets boring and unpredictable, is what I mean by I guess like having both sides equal is more important. And this is one I don't use a lot. I usually use the rule of thirds, which is coming up later on. And I don't tend to use symmetry a lot. But when I do, I make sure that it's really on purpose. Texture. Okay, so texture. Texture is what can make an image go from flat to like feeling like, oh, there's some depth there. So images are two-dimensional things, and yet with clever use of texture, they can come alive and become almost three-dimensional. And so you'll see this a lot in fine art photography, where they will have a picture and then they'll overlay what they call a texture, and it gives a different feeling to the photograph. So another thing is you include that texture in the picture. So like sometimes what I use a lot is grass. And you'll see a lot of photographers do this, where when you have a child sitting in the grass or a family sitting in the grass, and instead of taking a picture from above down onto them, they'll lower the camera almost into the grass, so you kind of get that grass in the foreground or the bottom of the picture. And it adds interest, and at the same time, as a bonus, which isn't covered in this class, but I'm gonna bring it up, it also provides a natural way of framing the subject, which is the family or child or whatever you're taking a picture of. So texture is also, it kind of goes hand in hand with patterns. But texture is just something that adds more interest. So it's usually when I use texture, it's either like the grass situation or it's done in Photoshop or added later. So, depth of field. So when most of the time when I'm doing portraits, especially outdoor, not so much in studio, but outdoor, I will make sure that the only thing in focus is the subject. So even with your cell phone, you can do this. And remember the tapping on the screen to make sure it's focusing on their face. And what that does is, if you look at this picture, you can see that I wonder if it would, I think I'm not sharing what I think I'm sharing. Let me get out of here. Yeah, I'm not sharing what I thought I was sharing. Okay, well, let's see if that helps. I'm sorry, guys. I thought it was sharing a different screen, and I should have looked at Facebook a lot sooner. All right. So this was the basics. This was composition. This was the patterns. This is what I was thinking I was showing you the whole time. Okay. So here is an example of using a pattern in a photo, and then symmetry. This isn't a photo, it's a graphic, but you get the idea. Texture, it's not, again, it's not a photo, it's a graphic, but you really get the idea of this because having a texture feel kind of adds like a 3D element to it. Now, this one is too far. This one is the one I'm talking about, depth of field. So please bear with me. This is my first time ever using Zoom like this. I've used Zoom, but never to do a presentation. Okay. So now it went back to texture. Oh my goodness, sorry guys. All right, depth of field. The depth of field that you select when taking an image will drastically impact the composition of the image. So what that means is a depth of field, by the way, is this little sliver that is in focus, and the rest of it is not in focus. So the smaller that sliver that's in focus is, the bigger or the smaller your depth of field is, and the bigger that zone that's in focus is the bigger your depth of field is. And you can control that with both your phone and like a DSLR or mirrorless camera. You can control it. And then that's something that I control. That's my main tool that I use in my day-to-day photography. And what that does is, if you notice, this really makes this car, and my son took this picture, by the way, it really makes this toy car pop. And that's what your eye is drawn to, is this car. So if you had a bigger depth of field, then the background would be in focus and would probably not be as cool of an image because there would be a lot of distractions in that background, and it wouldn't bring attention to the toy car. Which, by the way, is usually what makes a quote unquote good picture, is when you just bring your eye to the subject in a way that's pleasing to them. Sorry, my house is dry. All right, so lines. Oops, I keep doing that. All right. Leading lines refers to a composition technique where the viewer's eye is attracted to lines that lead directly to the principal subject in the image. So I used this image in the background on purpose, and it was perfect. It was built into PowerPoint, but it works really great here because if you look at it, your eye naturally wants to go up to that word lines. It also might go here, but for me, my eye is drawn to this word because the lines come together here. These even are pointing toward it, and it's a good example because we use this a lot in photography, and I think people use it a lot without even realizing it. They just see an image and they love it, but they don't know why. And a lot of times, lines and symmetry and pattern all go together to really make that subject pop. Another great example from Bridge Park is those bridges, all of them create beautiful lines, and if you place your subject right, the lines will point to your subject and therefore make your eye, the viewer's eye, go to the subject. And people will find that interesting, but they won't know why. And this is why. Okay, so the rule of thirds. I mentioned this a little bit. What is the rule of thirds? So the rule of thirds is a guideline, and it applies to the process of composing visual images in our case, mostly photographs. And it helps to make a picture not so boring. Again, it's the way your eyes naturally go through a picture. If you use the rule of thirds, it makes it a lot more interesting. So here's an example. In this slide, I use the rule of thirds in the design to make the slide more visually appealing. The rule of thirds is a guideline that suggests placing the key graphic elements along lines which divide your image into thirds or at the intersections. So this is a lot of like technical words that are confusing. So if you think of a hashtag, that's why I have the hashtag here. If you think of a hashtag, if you place your subject on one of those lines or where they intersect, that's a good placement of your subject to keep your photo interesting. And I use this all the time, completely all the time. Like just, I would say almost every single photograph that I take, I use the rule of thirds, every single one. Unless I have a really, like, the only time I might not is once in a while, if somebody has a really interesting feature, like, for example, just prettiest eyes I've ever seen, I might place that eye in the very center of the photograph because that's going to make it really stand out. But that's something I don't use a lot. And when I do, it's a real extreme close-up. But yeah, this rule of thirds I use 99.99% of the time. All right, so let's move on to exposure real quick. And this is where things do get a little bit technical. I will keep it quick. I'll keep it short. We're already like a half hour into this. So sorry if I'm boring. I will get hopefully more interesting or more comfortable with this as I do it more. So there's three types of there's three parts of exposure. There's what they call a triangle of exposure. There's ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. And they work together to bring a proper exposure. Now, exposure is how bright or dark your picture is. And honestly, this is another thing that's subjective. And some pictures to convey mood, I will make them a little darker, but overall, my images tend to be pretty bright. Almost overexposed sometimes. And I do that on purpose. It's on purpose. And as long as you're doing it on purpose, then nobody can tell you it's wrong. That's the key. Okay, so ISO. ISO is the level of sensitivity of your camera to available light. The lower the ISO number, the less sensitive it is, while a higher ISO number increases the sensitivity of your camera. So one way that I really love to demonstrate the triangle of exposure and how things work in a more visual way is I imagine you have a bucket, probably like one, maybe like Home Depot or something, just a plastic bucket. And that bucket has a sponge in the bottom of it. And the bucket also has a lid on it that seals except for it has a hole. And the hole on the top could change size. Imagine you have a way of controlling that size. And the sponge, there's a couple different sponges that are interchangeable. So what the sponge represents is ISO. Imagine you have a sponge that's very absorbent. It sucks in that water. And by the way, water is light. It really sucks in that water. And so that would be high ISO. Imagine you have a sponge that's not very absorbent. Maybe it's like a pumice stone or something, I don't know. But it doesn't absorb that water, And so it takes a lot more water to fill the sponge because it's just not that absorbed. That would be a low ISO. So ISO affects the quality of your photo. That's why most of the time I do try to keep my ISO as low as possible because it will introduce what we call noise. It's also grain. It used to be film grain. And when you have it more sensitive, it doesn't get as much of the detail. You kind of lose that. But I think for the most part, if you're taking pictures on your cell phone, you're gonna have a lot of this, and your file sizes, which is also called image quality, is gonna be pretty low. But for what we use them for, which is usually sharing, it's fine. So if you look at the difference, the image on the right was taken at ISO of 3200, and on the left, it was 200. So, cool. Aperture. Aperture, if you remember the bucket with the lid with the hole in it, aperture is the size of that hole. So the size of the aperture would be the size of the hole. The hole itself is the aperture. Aperture is a hole that light passes through on its way through to the lens, or on its way through the lens to the sensor. The photographer controls the size of this hole. And I don't know if all phones can do it, but I know some phones are capable of choosing ISO. I do know that these newer phones, you can add an effect that blurs the background, and it's the same concept. So aperture controls the blurriness and it controls the field. So imagine, if you will, you have water dumping into that bucket and you have just a little tiny hole, which is a larger number aperture. And this is where it does get confusing. A larger number means a smaller hole. But I remember it not like that. I remember it as a larger number means a larger depth of field, less blur. But imagine that the hole in the lid of the bucket is really small. It would take a lot more water or light to fill that bucket up than if it was a bigger size hole. Then it would take a lot less water because you're letting more in faster. And remember, water is light. And so that's how aperture works. On a cell phone, I'm pretty sure most cell phones control that, but there might be a professional area. Like mine, I can't really control the aperture on my cell phone, but I can control the ISO and the white balance, which is the color. So you're kind of limited on a cell phone, but it's still good to know that if you use your blurring effect that your phone can do, like I know iPhones do it, I think iPhone 10 and newer, and my Samsung Galaxy, which I bought this year, it does it. It's the ones that really make everything blurry except for your subject. That's the whole concept of aperture. So if you have a cell phone, use that blurred background effect, but make sure that you adjust the strength to where it's on purpose. So the last part of exposure is shutter speed. Now, shutter speed is a little harder to explain with the bucket. It's more like how long you're letting that water pour in. And so if you imagine everything working together, if that sponge is pretty absorbing and you have that hole pretty large, then you don't have to let the water in that long. And it's the same thing, shutter speed. So photography is all about light and how much gets that sensor. All these things control that exposure, which is how light affects your images. Shutter speed is the length of time that a camera shutter is open when taking a photograph. And it's also the one thing that you control when you're doing, say, somebody in motion or kids in motion or sports. That's something to freeze that motion. And sometimes people use it, for example, if you see a picture of a bicyclist and the bicyclist is in focus and everything else is just a blur, and you understand they're moving because of the blur, that's something that's done on purpose by the photographer by zooming in and they pan with that bicyclist so the background is blurry and the bike's in focus. Probably don't care too much about that. All right, so crop. Why am I talking about crop? Cropping is something that a lot of people misunderstand. So cropping takes away the image quality or the size. Imagine, if you will, you have a regular letter-sized piece of paper, and you have a little tiny picture on it. That picture's not going to get any bigger if you cut it out. It's the same size. So when you're cropping, and let's say you took a picture of a family, but they have all this background around them, all of this stuff around them, and you just crop it because you want it to be more of a close-up. You can do that. I do cropping all the time. But the problem is, if you are using your cell phone and cropping from your already lower file on a cell phone, you're not making that picture bigger. You're just taking away the quality, the image size. So like I said, if you have that letter size paper and you have a little picture on it and you cut out all of that extra paper, it's still the same size. And it doesn't mean that you can print any bigger, you're losing information. So as long as you're comfortable with using that extra information, let's say you do have a DSLR or a bigger file size, then it's fine to do that. Or if you don't plan on printing it. But just remember that the more you crop, the more information that you're basically cutting out. Hang on, my kids need my attention. What does it say? Oh, you guys still have like 45 minutes before the internet comes on. My kids are asking for the internet. Anyway, so that's a quick breakdown of crop. And sometimes even photographers forget that when they are cropping in post-production, that it's taking away the quality. And then that brings us to our final slide. We're almost done here. Okay, so photo editing. And this is something that I would love to show people is editing pictures. I love editing and I love teaching it, but sometimes it's hard. Now that we have Zoom, I think it would be a little easier to actually show people. And I want to be able to mentor you as one-on-one. So if there's any interest in that, let me know if you want to learn how to edit pictures. And that includes cell phone pictures or anything. Professional level editing, let me know. So what is photo editing? Because I know before I was a photographer, I'd hear photographers be like, oh, I was up all night editing, but what is that? It's just any changing you do to pictures. And so I think everybody's edited a picture and not even known it. If you've made it brighter, you've edited a picture. If you've cropped, you've edited a picture. If you have added contrast or changed a picture from color to black and white, you edited a picture. So it's not as complicated as people might think. And yeah, there's programs out there that make it more complicated depending on what you want to do. But it's not that bad. Okay, so I'm gonna check real quick and see if there were any questions. Let's see. I don't see anything, but Facebook is weird sometimes. And I lost it. Oh my goodness. Well, Facebook made me lose.
Even kids.
Okay. Yeah, there's no questions. Hi, Brianna. Thank you for sharing this with somebody. All right. So if you end up watching this later and you have questions, make sure that you send them to me. It's totally fine. I don't mind answering. If you again, if you have ideas, I'd love to do this more. And if you want one-on-one, I actually prefer one-on-one. Get a hold of me. We might be able to work something out and within your budget. And so have a great rest of your day and thank you for watching. Bye.